Minjun goes down to the hall, putting on gloves. Business, he says briefly. I'll be back late. Aisha drops the rag. She suddenly intercepts him at the door. Don't go, she says, and her voice sounds strange, firm. You can't go today. I know that. She doesn't understand where this confidence comes from, but she feels danger in her bones. He turns around, looks at her face, sees not nervousness, but genuine horror. It's important, he says, but without his previous detachment. I can't cancel it. He pauses, silently assessing her fear. Okay, I heard you. I promise to be careful. I promise to be back by 10. Deal? He waits for her nod. Then he turns and walks out. The door closes with a soft click. Silence descends upon the house. Aisha stands and listens as the sound of his car's engine fades into the distance. Suddenly, the vast rooms seem too empty to her. She hears her own breathing and the loud ticking of a clock. The sound echoes in her temples. She's alone. 10 o'clock feels like an eternity. She needs to move. She needs to keep her hands occupied. Otherwise, these heavy thoughts will overwhelm her. She goes to the speaker and turns on the music at full volume. A thunderous beat fills the space, displacing the silence. Aisha abruptly opens the closet, grabs the vacuum cleaner, and turns it on. She moves the nozzle across the carpet with such force, as if trying to erase the traces of her fear. Her movements are sharp, almost angry. Then she takes a rag and polishes the furniture in time to the music. Her body begins to move, her feet tapping their feet. She catches her reflection in the glass door and sees a smile there. A real one. She's almost convinced herself. He promised. Everything will be okay. She immerses herself completely in the rhythm, in the movement, in the simple, clear work. She wipes the last shelf and turns to take the rag away. Aisha finishes dusting and turns around. A brief flash of blue light appears in the corner of her vision. She turns back to the table. The phone is lying on a polished surface. The screen is dark. Maybe she imagined it. She takes a step toward the table. At that moment, the phone lights up again. It shakes and bounces from the vibration. On the screen are the digits of an unfamiliar number. She slowly reaches out and picks up the phone. Her finger hovers over the screen for a second. Then she swipes it and brings the phone to her ear. Hello? She says. There's a background hum, voices and footsteps on the line. Then a man's voice, even and tired. Is this the phone from Minjun's residence? Aisha is silent for a second. She understands that if she tells the truth, they may not speak to her again. Yes, speak. You're Mr. Minjun. He was in an accident on the way into town. Car. He was taken to the central hospital. Aisha clutches the phone. He's unconscious. He hit his head. The doctors are talking about a serious head injury. When he comes to, there's a risk of complete memory loss. He might not remember anything. Aisha closes her eyes. His face stands before her, just as she saw it an hour ago. We found this number in his phone, the voice continues. There's one in his contacts. Aisha, who are you to him? His wife? Someone's supposed to be coming. Aisha opens her eyes. The word wife hangs in the air. If she says maid, she might not be allowed past the emergency room. If she says wife, the doors will open. And not just in the hospital. Yes, she says firmly. I'm his wife. I'll be there right now. Beeps. The call is over. Aisha lowers her hand holding the phone. She stands in the middle of the hall, motionless. The silence weighs on her ears. She just lied. To the doctors. She said she was his wife. This realization doesn't come right away. First comes the shock of hearing kish kish. Accident, unconscious, memory loss. Then comes the cold and a strange emptiness. She's not crying. She's just standing there, looking at her hand, still holding the phone. She's not thinking about him, but about her, yes. It's already been said. It can't be taken back. Her breath catches. She inhales sharply, as if floating up. Hospital, she says out loud in a whisper. She turns and practically runs to her room. She acts automatically. She grabs her bag, throws her wallet and keys inside. She tears off her apron. She unbuttons her work dress. She's already reaching for her usual dark dress in the closet. She needs to change and go, now. This plan is simple and clear. It doesn't give her time to think. She puts on her dress, straightens it, turns towards the door. She is almost out. She stops at the threshold of her room. Her gaze falls on a small mirror. In the mirror is a woman in a simple dark dress. Neat, but cheap, modest. As always, Aisha slowly moves away from the door. She turns and looks across the hall at the grand staircase, the high ceilings, the expensive chandelier. The voice from the phone sounds in her head. Are you the wife? Min-jun remembers nothing. The doctors already believe she is his wife. She will be the first person he sees. The thought comes unexpectedly and makes her heart beat faster. What if she doesn't go there as a servant? What if she enters the chamber as the mistress of this life? This is a chance, a crazy, dangerous, unique one, to live a life that is not yours, at least for a few days. Aisha takes off her simple dress and throws it on the bed. She opens the closet and takes out another dress. The only one. An expensive one. She bought it with all her savings and never wore it. She puts it on. The fabric is cold and heavy. The dress fits perfectly. She sits in front of the mirror. She takes out her makeup. She applies eyeliner and lipstick and a light foundation. She lets down her hair and styles it with quick movements. A different woman now looks back at her in the mirror. Not a servant. Someone who could live in this house in a different capacity. Aisha stands up. She takes not the old bag, but a small leather clutch. She puts her phone, money, and passport inside. She leaves the room. Her steps on the parquet floor of the hall sound clear and firm. She doesn't look around. She walks straight to the exit. She stops at the door, takes out her phone, calls a taxi, and gives the address of the hospital. The car will be there in 5 minutes. Aisha steps outside. The cold air hits her face. She stands and waits, her back straight. In her head, she repeats one thing. She is now Min-jun's wife, and she must play it flawlessly. The taxi drives through the city at night. Aisha sits in the back seat and looks out the window. The lights from streetlights and shop windows float past, merging into long yellow streaks. She feels the heavy fabric of her dress on her knees. She sees her reflection in the dark glass, coiffed hair, dark lips, a stern face. She almost doesn't recognize herself. The driver tries to speak once, to ask if everything is okay. Aisha answers curtly, "To the hospital." Urgently. He doesn't ask again. She clutches the clutch in her lap. Her fingers rest on the clasp. Inside is a phone, silent. She thinks about what could have happened. What did the accident look like? Was he alone in the car? Are there any other victims? Unanswered questions swirl in her head. The main question is different. What will she say when she sees him? How will she behave? She repeats one thing in her mind. "I am your wife. I am your wife. My name is Aisha." The car slows and turns into the driveway. Ahead is a tall, brightly lit building with a brightly lit admissions sign. Aisha's heart starts to beat faster. The taxi stops. Aisha quickly pays, barely glancing at the change, and gets out. The cold air of the hospital area smells of hand sanitizer and concrete. She squares her shoulders, takes a deep breath, and walks toward the glass doors, her heels clicking loudly on the asphalt. Inside, there's bright light, sterile whiteness, and a quiet hum. A woman in scrubs sits at the reception desk. Aisha approaches her. She sees her reflection in the polished counter. Now she looks not just elegant, but frightened. "My husband," Aisha says, her voice shaking and louder than it needs to be. She raises her voice a little on purpose. "Min-jun. He was just brought in. There was an accident. Where is he? They told me to come." The nurse looks at her, then quickly starts typing something on the computer. "Your last name?" "Min. I'm Aisha Min." "Just a second, let me check." Aisha stands and waits. She hugs her shoulders, makes a lost expression. She even makes her eyes fill with moisture, stares off into space, unblinking, for verisimilitude. "Come on," the nurse says, coming out from behind the counter. "He was just transferred from the intensive care unit to the intensive care unit. They're keeping an eye on him now. He's still unconscious, but stable." Aisha nods, her lips trembling. She follows the nurse down the long white corridor. Her heart is pounding no longer from fear, but from adrenaline. She's gotten into character. They let her in. The nurse stops at door number 307. "He's here. Get ready. It looks not so good. Lots of tubes and machines. Don't be scared." "I just want to see him," Aisha whispers. The door opens. Aisha enters first. The room is dimly lit, with only a dim lamp above the bed. The air smells of medicine and cleanliness. A high hospital bed sits in the center. Min-jun is lying on it. Aisha pauses for a moment in the doorway. She had seen him strong, collected, impenetrable. Now he seems smaller and more fragile. His face is pale, almost waxy. His eyes are closed. There's a bandage on his forehead. Tubes run from his nose and arm into him, connected to quietly beeping machines. One arm lies on top of the blanket, his hand bandaged. He doesn't look like a boss. He looks like a broken doll. The nurse checks something on the monitor and adjusts the IV. "You can sit with him. Talk. Sometimes coma patients can hear. It might help. If anything happens, press the call button." Thank you, Aisha says quietly. The nurse leaves. The door closes quietly. Aisha slowly approaches the bed. A chair stands nearby. She sits down. She places her clutch on her lap. She looks at him. The silence is broken only by the steady hiss of the oxygen machine and the quiet beeps of the monitor monitoring his pulse. She just sits and looks at his motionless face, at the bandage, at the tubes. She thinks about how an hour ago he left the house alive and well. He promised to come back. Technically, he kept his word. He's here, but everything else is broken. Pity rises suddenly and strongly in her throat, but she swallows it. Now is not the time to give in to despair. Now is the time to think. Aisha leans back in her chair. She looks away from his face and at the white wall opposite. Time to rehearse. She begins to replay the story in her head, detail by detail. My name is Aisha. I'm your wife. We've been married for 3 years. We met at an art gallery. You were buying a painting, and I was working there as a tour guide. You invited me to dinner. She paints this picture in her mind, trying to add sensual details. Our first date was at an Italian restaurant on the waterfront. You ordered pasta with truffles. I didn't know what that was back then. You laughed. She adds laughter. His rare, quiet laugh, the kind she's heard a couple of times. We live in a big house outside the city. You run the family business, importing luxury textiles. We're doing well. You work a lot, but you always find time for me. We love evenings by the fireplace. You read, and I knit. We have a dog, a golden retriever named Archie. He's waiting for us at home. The dog is a nice detail. It makes the story feel alive and cozy. You had an important business meeting today. You left. Then I got a call from the hospital. She stops. This part is true. There's no need to make it up. Aisha opens her eyes and looks at him again. She addresses him mentally. You don't remember anything, and it's scary. But I'm here. I'll tell you everything. I'll help you remember. She repeats this phrase several times, searching for the right intonation. Warm, soothing, loving. The plan seems as fragile as glass to her. One mistake, one wrong detail, and everything will shatter. But she has no other plan. She's already here. She's already his wife. She takes his hand again, the one that's not bandaged. His fingers are cold. She squeezes them carefully. Everything will be fine, she says quietly out loud, testing her voice. I'm with you. She doesn't know if she's telling him this or convincing herself, but the words are spoken. The role has begun. All that remains is to wait for him to open his eyes. Aisha dozed, her head slumped against the back of the chair. Suddenly, Minjun's fingers twitched faintly in her palm. She opens her eyes abruptly. His hand lies motionless. Perhaps she imagined it. Then his eyelids flutter. Slowly, with difficulty, he opens them. He stares at the ceiling with a dull, unseeing gaze. Aisha freezes, holding her breath. He's alive. He's come to. His pupils slowly focus. His eyes turn towards her. He looks at her. There's no recognition in his gaze, only emptiness, confusion, and a question. He tries to move his head and winces weakly in pain. Where? His voice is hoarse, barely audible. He stops and swallows. Where is it? Aisha quickly leans towards him. You're in the hospital. Everything is fine. You're safe. He blinks slowly. Oh, Aini. Taking this information in, his gaze wanders to the ceiling, to the tubes, to her face. What? What happened? Each question comes with effort. An accident. You were in a car accident. But now you're here, and the doctors say the danger has passed. He looks at her again. A long, searching gaze. Aisha's insides tighten into an icy ball. This is the decisive moment. And you? He says with difficulty. Who are you? Aisha takes a deep breath. She takes his hand in both of hers. She looks him straight in the eyes. Her voice is soft but confident, without trembling. My name is Aisha. I'm your wife. You don't remember anything, right? The doctor said you might have amnesia. That's normal. You hit your head. She sees the shock reflected in his eyes. He looks at her face, at their joined hands, at her expensive dress. Wife? He repeats the word, as if tasting it. It sounds foreign to him. Yes, darling. We've been married for 3 years. You don't recognize me, and that's okay. It will pass. I'll help you remember everything. I'm not going anywhere. She strokes his hand, waits. Minjun closes his eyes for a few seconds. He seems to collect his thoughts. Then he opens them again. His gaze is no longer so empty. A faint spark of understanding has appeared in it. And helplessness. Nothing, he whispers. I don't remember. Nothing at all. Empty. It's not scary, Aisha says quickly, squeezing his hand. The main thing is that you're alive. Everything else is a matter of time. Your memory will return. But for now, I will be your memory. He looks at her. He sees her anxious eyes, her willingness to help. He has no other bearings in this new, empty world, only this woman who calls herself his wife. He squeezes her fingers lightly in response, a barely perceptible movement. Thank you, he breathes out. That you're here. These words are his surrender. He accepts her version. Aisha feels a weight lift from her soul. The first barrier has been overcome. I'm always here, she says, raising her hand to call a nurse. I'll call the doctor now. He'll explain everything. 2 days pass. Minna June is discharged. His condition has stabilized, but his memory loss remains complete. The doctors shrug their shoulders and say he needs time and a familiar environment. Aisha spends all these days in the hospital. She plays her role flawlessly, caring, attentive, a little sad that he doesn't remember her. The staff treats her with sympathy. She helps him dress. His own clothes, brought from home, feel foreign to him. He moves slowly, carefully, as if afraid of breaking. She leads him by the arm to the exit. He squints in the daylight. Our car? He asks quietly. Our car is being repaired after an accident, Aisha quickly replies. I called a taxi. Home. He nods, accepting it as a fact. The taxi is driving along a route familiar to Aisha. She sits next to it, giving directions to the driver. Min-jun stares out the window silently. He sees the streets, the buildings, the people, and recognizes nothing. His face is tense and focused, like a child's in an unfamiliar place. We'll be there soon, Aisha says, placing her hand on his arm. Calm down. He looks at her hand, then at her. He nods. The car turns onto a familiar driveway and stops in front of a large, austere mansion. We're here, Aisha says and pays. They walk out. Min-jun looks at the facade of the house, at the tall windows, at the massive door. There's no spark of recognition in his eyes, only wariness. Aisha takes his arm. Her key opens the door with a jingle. Welcome home, she says, letting him inside first. He crosses the threshold and pauses in the hallway. His gaze slowly sweeps over the interior. He enters the house that was once his, as if it were a strange, luxurious prison. The only anchor in this new world for him now is the woman beside him, holding his arm tightly. The door closes. Min-jun stands in the middle of the hall and slowly turns, looking around. Big, he says quietly. Aisha nods, taking off her coat. Her hands tremble slightly. She hangs it in the closet, then helps him take off his jacket. He's as passive as a child. You need to rest. Come on, I'll show you the bedroom, she says. He silently follows her up to the second floor. She opens the door to the master bedroom, a spacious room with a large bed and heavy curtains. Everything exudes his taste. Understated, expensive, without excess. He stops at the threshold. Did I sleep here? Yes, we both did. He nods, but can't seem to bring himself to enter. Everything here is alien and frightening. Maybe in the living room? On the couch? He suggests hesitantly. Of course, Aisha agrees immediately. She herself feels uneasy at the thought of lying next to him on this huge bed. She leads him back downstairs to the large living room. She lays him down on the wide sofa and brings him a pillow and a blanket. He sits up, then slowly lies down, his face pale from fatigue and tension. I'll bring you some water and the medications you prescribed, Aisha says, and goes to the kitchen. There she leans against the counter for a second and breathes deeply. Her heart is pounding. She pours water into a glass, her hands still not quite obeying her. She fights the urge to run to her room and lock herself in, but she can't. She has to take care of him, be his wife. She returns with water and pills. He obediently swallows them. Then he lies down and stares at the ceiling. Can I open the window? He asks. I'll air it out. She opens the window. The evening air rushes into the room. He lies with his eyes closed. She sits in the chair opposite him, watching him. The silence becomes heavy. She's afraid to make an unnecessary move, to say the wrong thing. These first hours are like walking on thin ice. A couple of hours later, he opens his eyes. It seems the short nap has given him some strength. He sits up and looks around. It's getting dark, he notes. Yes. Do you want me to light the fireplace? Aisha asks. She remembers adding this detail to her legend. Evenings by the fireplace. Please. She stands up and carefully arranges the wood in the fireplace, turning on the gas. A minute later, the fire begins to crackle, casting a warm glow on the walls. Min-jun looks at the flames, his face appearing less tense in the orange light. Tell me, he says suddenly, without taking his eyes off the fire. About us. About our lives. I don't know anything. I need to start somewhere. Aisha freezes. The main test has arrived. Okay, she says calmly, returning to her chair. Where should I start? You first, I guess. And me. You're Min Jun. You're 38 years old. You run a family business importing exclusive fabrics from Asia and Europe. You have an office in the city, but you work most of the time from here, from home. You value peace and order. He nods, listening. The information falls onto a blank sheet of paper. And I'm Aisha, 3 years younger. We met 3 years ago at a contemporary art gallery. You were there on business. I was working part-time as a tour guide. We got to talking about an abstract painting. You invited me for coffee. Aisha speaks slowly, infusing her voice with warmth. She describes their first date in a small, cozy restaurant, his embarrassment when he got the names of the dishes on the menu wrong. She invents sweet, vivid details. You proposed 6 months later. Very simply, without any fanfare. Over breakfast. You said, I think we should get married. If you don't mind. I said yes. She talks about a small, intimate wedding, a honeymoon on the coast, and how they searched for this house and bought it together 2 years ago. We love silence. We often read like this by the fireplace. You prefer historical novels. I prefer biographies. We have a dog, a golden retriever named Archie, but he's currently visiting a friend of mine. While you were in the hospital, I couldn't look after him. You adore him, although at first you were against having animals in the house. She creates a whole world. She talks about his habits. He drinks coffee without sugar, but with cinnamon. He hates it when floorboards creak. He loves watching old black and white movies on Sundays. She weaves into the story real details that she knows as a maid. The creaking floorboards in the hall, his collection of rare teas in the kitchen. What about family? He asks cautiously. My parents? Aisha was preparing for this. Your parents live in Seoul. You have a good but distant relationship. They came to visit us once. You and your father are a little cold to each other, but you respect each other. You have a younger sister. She lives in Canada. You rarely communicate, but it's warm. My parents, they're no longer alive. She says this with a slight, appropriate sadness in her voice. Min Jun listens without interrupting. He glances from the fire to her. His face gradually relaxes. Fear and tension recede before this stream of clear, detailed facts. Her story is coherent, logical, filled with everyday details that are difficult to invent on the fly. He asks a few clarifying questions. About business. About Archie's appearance. About the restaurant where they had their first date. Aisha answers confidently, adding new details to the picture. Then he falls silent. He sits for a long time, looking at the fire. The flames are reflected in his eyes. It's strange, he finally says quietly. I'm listening to you, and it seems plausible, but my head is empty. Not a single image, not a single feeling. It will pass, Aisha says softly. The doctor said memory might come back in bits and pieces, or all at once. The main thing is not to force it. You're very patient, he says, looking at her. His voice is filled with genuine gratitude and weariness. And strong. I'd probably be at a loss if I were you. I just love you, Aisha breathes out. And these words, spoken as part of a legend, seem surprisingly true to her for a second. He extends his hand across the space between them. Aisha, after a moment's hesitation, takes it. His fingers are warm from the heat of the fireplace. Thank you for being there, he says simply. At that moment, Aisha realized she'd passed the test. He believed her. He'd accepted her story, and with it, hers. The ice beneath her feet temporarily turned to solid ground. She'd bought herself a little time. Now the main thing was not to stumble. Morning light filters through the cracks in the living room curtains. Aisha wakes up with a stiff neck. She spent the night in a chair, covered with a blanket. Min Jun is still asleep on the sofa, his breathing even. She gets up carefully so as not to wake him, and goes to the kitchen. The ritual of making coffee is painfully familiar. She puts on water, pours in a Turk, his favorite fine grind, a pinch of cinnamon. Her hands automatically perform the usual actions. But today, everything is different. Today, she is making coffee for her husband. She hears cautious footsteps. She turns around. Min Jun is standing in the kitchen doorway. He's wearing the same clothes as yesterday, looking rumpled and lost. Good morning, Aisha says quietly. Morning. He nods and awkwardly looks around the kitchen, as if seeing it for the first time. I couldn't find the bathroom. I'll show you right now. But first, coffee? It's almost ready. He agrees. She pours coffee into cups and places it in front of him. No sugar. He lifts the cup, inhales the aroma and tastes it. So I always drink it? He asks. Yes. With cinnamon. Strange. The taste is familiar, but I don't remember. The helplessness in his voice is palpable again. Aisha sits down across from him with her cup. They drink in silence. The new reality of this morning is heavy and awkward. She is an actress on the stage of her own kitchen. He is a spectator who has forgotten the plot of the play. After breakfast, Aisha invites him to shower and change. She leads him to the bedroom and opens the closet. Your things are here, she says, taking a step back. He looks at the rows of formal suits, shirts, and neatly arranged items. Nothing evokes a response. He slowly takes out a pair of simple trousers and a sweater. I'll go while you change, Aisha says, and quickly leaves, closing the door behind her. She leaned against the wall in the hallway. She needed to leave. Watching him undress, being in the same room with him while he changed, it was too much. It violated the invisible but rigid boundary that had existed between them for years. Her body responded automatically, by retreating. Later, when he leaves, she leads him into the office. He sits down at the massive desk, running his fingers over the wood surface. Did I work here? Yes. You love this table. You said it brings good luck. She stands in the doorway, hesitant to enter and sit. This is his space. She always came here only to clean or to communicate. Habit keeps her at the threshold. Why are you standing there? He remarks. Come in. She steps forward and sits on the edge of the guest chair, her back straight. She can't lounge casually like a hostess. The day drags on slowly. They speak little. He remains silent for long periods, lost in his idle thoughts, occasionally asking questions about objects in the house. Aisha answers, continuing to weave the fabric of the legend. Evening falls. The question she's been dreading arises naturally as she turns off the light in the living room. Where will you sleep? Minjun asks. He's standing by the sofa he slept on last night. Aisha freezes. The correct answer for a wife is, with you, of course. But the thought fills her with a quiet dread. She can't lie next to him. It would be the most brutal invasion of his personal space and the ultimate collapse of all internal barriers. But refusing would raise suspicions. Why wouldn't a wife want to be around her traumatized husband? She stutters, searching for the words. I don't want to disturb you. You're not strong enough yet. You might move around. And I'm afraid I might accidentally hurt you. But if you want, I can lie down next to you. She squeezes out the last sentence, looking at the floor. This is her advance, a risk. She hopes that he, with his natural reserve, will choose to keep his distance. Minjun looks at her. Silence for a while. You're right, he finally says. I don't know how I'm going to sleep either, and it still feels weird. Let's do it this way for now. Is that okay with you? Of course not, Aisha answers too quickly, and her relief is probably all too obvious. I'll be in the next room. If anything happens, just call. She turns and almost runs upstairs to her old maid's room. Closing the door, she takes a deep breath. Another day has passed. But this game of intimacy at a distance is wearing on her nerves. The next morning, Aisha wakes up with a familiar instinct. She needs to make breakfast. She pulls on her old, comfortable robe and heads to the kitchen. Her mind is racing with a to-do list. Order groceries, check for cleaning, call the doctor. She makes an omelet, slices toast, and sets 2 utensils on the table. She acts automatically. When Minjun enters the kitchen, she places a plate and a cup of fresh coffee in front of him, without looking at him. I need to call the clinic today and make an appointment for a checkup, she says, standing at the table. She doesn't sit down. She waits for him to start eating, as she has done hundreds of times. He looks at his plate, then at her, slowly looks up. You're not going to eat? Aisha blinks. Realization hits her like an electric shock. She stands before him like a waitress, like a servant. Oh, yes, of course. She mumbles sheepishly and finally sits down. She picks up her fork, but her movements are constrained. She can't relax. Later, when he goes into his office to try to work on some documents, which seem foreign to him, she begins cleaning. She dusts the living room and straightens the cushions on the sofa. He comes out to ask about a file and finds her kneeling, checking for dust accumulation under the sofa. She jumps up, dusts her knees, blushing for no apparent reason. She caught herself doing what she always did, the unnoticeable task of keeping his world in perfect order. But now he's watching, and in his glance, she catches something new. Not the master's gratitude, but a slight bewilderment, as if something doesn't add up. As if a wife who just told him about her travels and plans together shouldn't be dusting under the furniture with such fanatical meticulousness. Everything okay? He asks. Yes, yes, I like cleanliness, she snaps, and hurries away with a rag in her hands, feeling her face burning. Old habits, deeply ingrained in her muscle memory, begin to treacherously break through the thin veneer of her new role. And Aisha realizes that controlling them is much more difficult than inventing stories. The morning of the third day dawns. The night had been restless, and Aisha had barely slept. She rises early, while Minjun is still asleep, and decides to do what always calms her nerves: cleanliness. She plans to check the storage room on the first floor, where dust and cobwebs sometimes appear. It's dirty work. She goes into her room and automatically, without thinking, opens the bottom drawer of the dresser. There, neatly folded, lie her work clothes, several simple blue pinafore dresses and white aprons. She takes out one set. The fabric is rough and familiar to the touch. She quickly changes. The old dress fits her loosely. The apron ties in the back, with the familiar bow. She doesn't look in the mirror. She simply does what she's done 1,000 times. She feels a strange relief. In these clothes, she doesn't have to play a role. In these clothes, she's simply Aisha, doing her job. She quietly descends into the pantry near the kitchen, grabs a rag and a stepladder, and begins wiping down the top shelves. She's immersed in the monotonous process, her thoughts wandering elsewhere. She doesn't hear the quiet footsteps. Minjun wakes up and goes to the kitchen for water. As he passes the open pantry door, he stops dead in his tracks. He sees her back, the narrow straps of a simple blue dress, a white apron, her hair pulled back into a careless bun. She stands on a stepladder, reaching for the top shelf. He is silent for a few seconds, watching. Then he says quietly, "Aisha?" She flinches in surprise, nearly dropping the rag, and slowly turns around. Seeing his face, she freezes. Cold horror courses through her veins. She sees his gaze slowly sliding over her dress, her apron, the rag in her hand. He looks not with anger, but with deep, growing bewilderment. "What? What is this?" he asks quietly, taking a step forward. His voice is even, but there's a steely tension to it. Aisha climbs down from the stepladder, her face flushed. She tries to cover her apron with her hands, but this only highlights its presence. "I was just cleaning. It's dusty in here," she mumbles, looking at the floor. "In this?" He doesn't look away. "You clean in this dress? It looks like a uniform." He comes closer. His eyes are analytical now, studying. He sees more than just the clothes. He sees her posture, hunched, guilty. He sees her hands, habitually clutching the rag. He sees the way she avoids his gaze. "You didn't sit down at the table until I started eating yesterday either," he says slowly, as if putting together a puzzle. "You stand in the office doorway, as if you're waiting for permission to enter. You sleep in the other room and look at me as if you're afraid to touch me." He pauses. The air in the small pantry becomes thick and heavy. "You call me husband, you tell me stories of our love, but you act like a servant. What's going on here, Aisha?" His questions don't sound like accusations. They sound like an attempt to get to the truth, and that scares her more than his screaming. He stands up. Aisha, speechless with fear, automatically rises from the sofa. She expects him to throw her out of the house, fire her, throw her out into the street. But he turns and walks not toward the exit, but deeper into the house, toward his office. He opens the door to his office, steps behind the massive desk, and presses a discreet panel on a bookcase filled with tomes on economics and art history. With a soft click, a section of the bookcase slides aside, revealing a small, dark, windowless room. Aisha never knew about her existence. Her heart is pounding wildly. "Come in," he says, turning on the light. Inside, a wall covered with a dozen flat-screen monitors. Beneath them, a control panel with keyboards and joysticks. The screens show real-time views of various corners of the mansion: the front entrance, the hallway, the kitchen, the entrance to the study, the courtyard. This is the security system she's only vaguely aware of, but has never actually seen. "Sit down," he says, pointing to the single swivel chair in front of the console. Aisha, her legs almost numb, sank into a chair. He sat down next to her, his movements slow and precise. He reached for the keyboard, his fingers habitually typing out commands. "The entire system writes to the archive for 30 days, he explains, without emotion, like an engineer. "Then it overwrites. Let's take a look." He opens the archive menu and selects the date, the very evening he left for the fateful meeting. He finds a timestamp about an hour after his departure. He presses play. A black and white, yet very clear image of the hallway appears on the central monitor. Aisha sees herself, the real her, in a simple dress and apron. She pauses by the window, watching the receding headlights. Then, decisively shaking her head, she goes to the speaker and turns on the music. She sees the Aisha who began cleaning, her movements gradually becoming more free, her dancing a little. "It's you," he says quietly. "My servant." He rewinds. Aisha is on the screen wiping dust, washing the glass, and then he sees the phone flash. He sees her freeze, turn off the music, walk slowly to the table. He zooms in. He sees her face tense, the way she brings the phone to her ear. The conversation is inaudible, but her body language is telling. She goes rigid. "You get that call," he states. He rewinds again. Now the timestamp is 40 minutes later. The screen shows an empty hallway. And then, from the corridor leading to the servants' quarters, another woman emerges. Aisha, in that very same dark burgundy dress, with her hair done and her makeup applied. She walks with a firm, confident gait that is not typical of a maid. She looks straight ahead, her face a mask of composure and determination. She picks up her clutch from the table and walks out of the frame toward the exit. "And this is a completely different woman," he says. His voice sounds ghostly. "A woman who goes to the hospital pretending to be my wife." Aisha can't tear her eyes away from the screen. She sees this dichotomy, this contrast, so obvious now. She sees herself, timid, accustomed to the shadows, and herself playing the role of mistress. It's merciless proof. He closes the archive. He switches to real-time mode. The monitors show the quiet life of the house again. One of the screens shows the kitchen, where she prepared breakfast this morning. "All this time," he says, pointing at the screens, "you were here. You kept it in perfect order. Even this morning, when I left, you were already on your feet." He pauses. "Why didn't you run away? When you realized the deception was being exposed, why didn't you take the money, the valuables? You had the keys. You knew where everything was." Aisha finally tears her gaze away from the monitors and looks at him. The tears are no longer contained, silently rolling down her cheeks, but her voice doesn't waver. "Because I'm not a thief, and I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted a break, to feel, even for a few days, that this house could be mine, that I don't have to worry about breaking a vase or sitting on the wrong chair. I took advantage of your misfortune. It's terrible, and I'm ready to leave, now, without taking anything." She rises from her chair. Her figure in her blue work dress seems small and broken in front of this wall of technology, mercilessly recording her deception. "I'm not making excuses. Everything I told you about our life was a lie. We didn't meet at the gallery. We don't have a dog. You never proposed to me over breakfast. I just cleaned your house, and you barely noticed I was there. That's all." Min-jun also slowly rises. He stands next to her, looking at her, tear-stained in the maid's uniform, who has just confessed to a massive, insane deception. He is silent for a long time. Aisha, she's ready for anything, for screaming, for the police, for immediate expulsion. She even takes a step toward leaving the room. "Stop," he says quietly. She freezes. "You lied about the big things," he says. "But about the little things, you were honest. You told me I drink coffee with cinnamon, that I hate the creaking of floorboards, that I like watching old movies. How did you know that?" I just observed," Aisha breathes out. "Over the years. It's my job to notice things like this." "Exactly," he nods. "Your job, and you did it well. You didn't steal. You didn't run away. Even when you had the chance, you came to the hospital when you could have simply disappeared. You looked after me these days, even if it was a lie. But you looked after me well. You didn't cause me any real danger or harm. You just showed me a very strange mirror." He turns and walks out of the truth room back into the office. Aisha, confused, follows him. "I won't throw you out," he says, looking out the window at the garden. "The deception is exposed. The game is over. Your attempt to take advantage of the situation was desperate and foolish, but not malicious." He turns to face her. "Tomorrow, everything goes back to normal. You are a servant in this house. I am your employer. No more stories by the fireplace. No more shared breakfasts. Boundaries will be respected, strictly." He pauses, and his gaze hardens, just as she remembered it before the accident. "But if you lie to me again or try to steal anything, then that's it. Understood?" Aisha nods, unable to utter a word. This isn't forgiveness. This is a reprieve. This is a chance to stay where there's a roof over her head, where she knows her job. "Now go," he says, sitting down at his desk and looking at the mess of papers he has yet to rethink. "And take off that dress. Put on your usual one. The house needs to be tidied up. Aisha nods again and leaves the office, quietly closing the door. She stands in the hallway, leaning against the wall. Her knees are buckling. It's over. Her great 3-day lie has collapsed. But she's not outside. She walks slowly to her room. She takes off her blue work dress and apron. She puts on her simple everyday dress. She looks in the mirror. There she is again, who she always was. But something inside has shifted. She risked everything and lost, but she survived. And the man she deceived showed not anger, but some strange, calculating mercy. She doesn't understand this, but today she doesn't need to understand. Today, she just needs to do her job. Once she steps over to the edge, she will forever know that the world on the other side is not hers. Her world is here, in the cleanliness and order that she maintains. And perhaps that is enough for now. A week had passed since the revelation. A new, fragile truce had settled in the household. Aisha carried out her duties with redoubled diligence, trying to remain invisible. Min-jun gradually delved into the affairs, retrieving memories of the business through documents and phone calls, but there was complete silence about his personal past. They barely spoke, except for the necessary phrases. Dinner is served. The mail has arrived. One morning, while Aisha was polishing the staircase banister in the hall, Min-jun emerged from his office. He was searching for something in the pockets of his jacket, which he had taken from the hanger, and as he turned around, he seemed to accidentally drop a thin leather wallet on the floor. It fell with a dull thud, slightly open. The corners of credit cards and several high-denomination bills peeked out. Min-jun, pretending not to notice anything, walked into the dining room, leaving his wallet lying on the floor in plain sight. Aisha froze, rag in hand. Her gaze fell on the wallet, then on the back of its departing owner. Hadn't he seen it? Or was this a test? Her heart pounded anxiously. She approached and picked up the wallet. The leather was soft and expensive to the touch. She could quickly take a couple of bills. He would hardly immediately remember the exact amount, or even hide the entire wallet, later claiming she hadn't seen it. She stood there for a few seconds, clutching it in her hand. Then, exhaling firmly, she walked to the dining room door and rapped her knuckles on the frame. "Mr. Min-jun," she said clearly, "you dropped your wallet in the hall." He turned from the window, his face impassive. "Ah," he said. "Thank you. Put it on the dresser." She did so. As she returned to the stairs, he quietly added, "Honesty is a good quality." She merely nodded, without looking up. The first test had been passed, but it hadn't made things any easier. She realized she was being watched. A few days later, Min-jun received a visitor, a man his age, Chan-hos, a business partner. They retired to his office. Aisha, as usual, brought tea and coffee, then left, intending to clean the second floor. Less than half an hour had passed when the office door opened and Chan-ho came out. "Miss, sorry to bother you." He smiled at her amiably. "Min-jun is out of some documents in the car. He's busy making a call. Could you help? The keys are on the table in the hallway, in the silver sedan. The folder is in the back seat." Aisha nodded and went to do the job. The task was simple. When she returned with the folder and went into the office to hand it over, Min-jun was talking on the phone, having moved to the window. Chan-ho remained at the desk. He took the folder from her, thanked her, and then, lowering his voice, spoke as if casually. "It's a difficult time for him now. He doesn't remember anything. How is he in everyday life? Hasn't he become difficult? Is it hard to be with him?" The question sounded like a colleague's normal concern, but something in the tone made Aisha wary. She answered cautiously, "Everything's fine. He's recovering." "Glad to hear it," Chan-ho nodded. "You know, I see you're running things here. I feel like you're in charge. I have a bigger house myself, and staffing is a constant headache. Have you thought about changing jobs? I have a couple of friends who are looking for just such a responsible person to manage the household for a wealthy family. The salary," he quoted a figure 1.5 times her current salary, "and the conditions are excellent. You can give me your answer tomorrow." The temptation was overwhelming. To leave, to start over, where she wouldn't be known as a liar. For good money. She thought for a second, her gaze sliding around the office, over Min-jun's back. He was still talking on the phone, seemingly oblivious to them. Aisha said, her own voice sounding calm and firm, "But I'm needed here, and I have an agreement. I can't leave." Chang H smiled, a little wider than necessary. "Loyalty is a rare trait. I understand. I won't distract you anymore." When Aisha left, closing the door, Chang-ho turned his gaze to Min-jun. He had already put down his phone. "Well?" Min-jun asked calmly. "She refused." Chang Ho shook his head. Without hesitation, she thought for a moment, but then refused. Your maid, June, is either very smart or truly devoted to you. In her situation, most people would have jumped at the chance to escape. Min Jun didn't answer, just nodded. Test number 2 had been passed. After Chang Ho's departure, the atmosphere in the house changed again. It didn't become warm, but Min Jun's icy detachment melted slightly. He began entrusting Aisha not only with routine tasks, but also with more important ones, paying bills through a secure bank account using his one-time password, filtering important business emails from spam. It was distrust in reverse, trust in action. One day at dinner, he now sometimes ate in the cafeteria. Instead of taking food to his office, he suddenly asked, "Why did you turn down Chang Ho's offer?" The salary was higher. Aisha, standing by the buffet, she still couldn't bring herself to sit at the same table with him without an invitation, shrugged. I gave my word to stay, and that would be like running away. And I don't want to run away anymore. Running away from what? He narrowed his eyes. Running away from the consequences. From what I've done. I lied to you. Staying and doing my job, that's some kind of retribution. He looked at her carefully, then returned to his food. You're overcomplicating this, sis, he muttered. Sometimes you just have to do what you think is right, regardless of the consequences. The most difficult challenge was the assignment he gave her 2 weeks later. He had to go to another city for 2 days to conduct his first in-person negotiations since the accident. Everything was arranged. He was to be accompanied by a driver and a new, temporarily hired security assistant. Before leaving, he called Aisha into his office. I'm leaving. The house and everything in it is yours. No guests, no strangers. You're the only one with full access. He placed a ring of keys and a tablet open to the security system page on the desk. The cameras are working. The archive is being written. I'll be checking remotely. It was a pure test. He left her alone with a vast fortune, knowing she had motives for theft or revenge. He gave her complete power and complete responsibility. Aisha spent those 2 days in a state of nervous tension. She did everything as usual, cleaned, cooked herself a simple meal, and didn't even touch the wine in his cellar. In the evenings, she sat in her room and read. It never even occurred to her to rummage through his things or try to copy anything from the computer. She felt the invisible gaze of the cameras and his distant but tangible presence through the system. When he returned, the first thing he did, without even taking off his coat, was go into the room with the monitors. Aisha was standing in the hallway, awaiting the verdict. He emerged 10 minutes later. Everything's fine, he stated. Even more so. You even watered the flowers in the living room. I think I forgot to tell you to do that. They started to wilt, she said simply. That evening, he called her into his office again. His face was serious. Sit down, he pointed to a chair. She sat down, crossing her hands in her lap. I ran 3 checks, he began frankly. The wallet, the job offer, and these 2 days. You passed them all. Not perfectly, but fairly. Aisha was silent, looking at him. My memory isn't returning, he continued. The doctors say it might stay that way. I have to rebuild my life and build my understanding of the people around me from scratch. You turned out to be a difficult case. You lied to me at the very beginning, but all your subsequent actions speak of the opposite, of honesty and a strange sense of duty. He paused, choosing his words. Managing this house, coordinating the staff when hired, and dealing with household issues, it takes up time I need for the business. I can't do both until I'm fully recovered. Aisha listened, not understanding where he was leading. So I'm offering you more than just remaining a servant. I'm offering you the position of manager of this house, with a corresponding salary increase and a clear scope of responsibilities that we'll agree on. You're already doing half the work. You know every corner of this place. And as our inspections have shown, you can be trusted with the keys and the responsibility. Aisha was speechless. It wasn't a reprimand or banishment. It was an offer she would never have dreamed of. Why? She breathed. After everything I've done? Because after everything you've done, you could have run away or stolen. But you didn't, he replied. And because in this empty world I've woken up to, you're the only person whose actions I can predict. You chose to stay and bear your burden. In today's reality, that's worth a lot. Well, do you agree? Aisha looked at his outstretched hand, not to shake, but as a gesture of agreement. She saw in his eyes not trust yet, but a willingness to give her a chance. Her great lie had led her not to the role of wife, but to a role within her power and honor. She nodded slowly. Yes, Mr. Minjun, I agree. He nodded in response. Okay, We'll discuss the details tomorrow. For now, the day is over. Go get some rest, manager. The last words sounded not like a mockery, but like a statement of a new situation. Aisha left the office. She didn't feel dizzy with delight. She felt only a heavy, calm confidence. Her adventure had ended in the complete failure of her dreams, but her honesty, shown in desperate circumstances, had led her to the place that was rightfully hers. She looked again at the hall, at this enormous house. Now she was not a shadow, not an imposter, but its housekeeper and guardian. This was less than she had wanted then, in a fit of madness, but it was more than she could have hoped to receive in truth. And it was lasting. The agreement was drawn up on paper, dryly and legally. Aisha received a new contract, new keys, not only to the storage rooms, but also to the safe containing the household finances, and access to a separate account in the home management system. Her salary increased significantly, almost to the level of Chan Ho's offer, but with a clear list of responsibilities. The first task was hiring a cleaning assistant. Min Jun made it clear, you're in charge, not doing everything yourself. Otherwise, there's no point in getting promoted. Aisha, she posted job postings and conducted interviews. It felt strange, sitting on the other side of the table, evaluating others. Ultimately, she chose a quiet, mature woman named Maria, with impeccable references and calm eyes. Aisha gave her clear instructions and a schedule, trying to sound less like a former colleague and more like a manager. It was stern, but fair. Min Jun observed this process from the sidelines, without interfering. He watched as Aisha, overcoming her inner uncertainty, learned to give orders, check work, and keep a simple record of household expenses. She made mistakes. She oversaw things too closely, then, conversely, missed important details. But she learned quickly, with the same meticulous care with which she once scrubbed stains from marble. A week later, Min Jun announced that he would be holding an important working meeting in his office with 2 potential foreign investors. They would need to create a comfortable yet respectable atmosphere. Everything's on you, he said simply. From decorating the office and the sitting room for the preliminary discussion to the menu. Here's the budget. Give me the estimate and plan by this evening. This was the first major test of her new skills. Aisha didn't panic. She spent the day researching which flowers suit a business interior, what coffee these foreigners consider elite. She found out through Min Jun's assistant what menu from a local catering company would be both sophisticated and understated. She wasn't trying to show off. She was striving for impeccable appropriateness. When she presented the plan, Min Jun looked it over, asked a couple of clarifying questions about cost and logistics, and nodded. Approved. Go ahead. On the day of the meeting, the house was perfectly and unobtrusively prepared. Flowers stood in the study and living room, unobtrusively scented. Everything was immaculately clean. The catering service worked quietly and efficiently. Aisha, dressed in a new formal dark gray suit, purchased at her own expense as an investment in her image, coordinated the process. She greeted guests at the door with Min Jun, introduced herself as the manager, and escorted them to the living room where everything was ready. Then she quietly disappeared, emerging only to signal that dinner was served. Min Jun saw the guests' glances assess the setting and their silent approval. Everything spoke of order, taste, and control. After the meeting, after seeing the guests off, he found Aisha in the kitchen, compiling a catering expense report. Everything went well, he said. They appreciated the organization. Thank you. A simple thank you from him meant more than effusive praise from anyone else. Aisha nodded. Maria will do an extra cleaning of the office tomorrow. All the bills will be on your desk by noon. He nodded again and left. Aisha allowed herself to exhale and smile weakly. She had done it. Despite her new status, the past still made itself felt, mostly in habits. Sometimes, lost in calculations, she caught herself standing when he entered the room, or straightening a vase in his path, even though that was Maria's responsibility. Old instincts died hard. One evening, while sorting through old boxes in the utility room, she decided to tidy up that too. Aisha came across a blue pinafore dress and a white apron folded into a neat square. Her old work set. She picked it up. The fabric was rough and familiar. For a second, a wave of memories washed over her. The smell of polish, the sound of the vacuum cleaner, the feeling of being invisible. She didn't hear the footsteps. Min Jun stood in the doorway of the utility room, watching her hold the uniform in her hands. Should I throw it away? He asked calmly. Aisha shuddered and turned around. No, she said unexpectedly. I think I'll keep it. As a souvenir. About what? His questions sounded not like a challenge, but like genuine interest. About who I was. So I don't forget where this journey began, she replied, carefully folding the dress back. He was silent for a second. That's a good idea, he finally said and left. Aisha put the uniform in the far corner of the closet, not on the top shelf, out of sight. But she didn't throw it away either. It was her anchor to reality. One day, a woman called the house. Aisha, as usual, picked up the intercom. Hello, Minjun residents. This is Manager Aisha. There was a slight hesitation on the other end of the line. Aisha, this is Lee and Young. Have we met? I'm trying to contact Minjun. It's a personal matter. The name struck a chord in Aisha's mind. She'd seen it in Minjun's old paper diary while sorting through the archives in his office. And in his email inbox, which she now had access to filter, there were several emails from that address signed Nayeon. In the months before the accident, the tone was warm, personal. Mr. Minjun is busy right now, Aisha answered automatically. May I ask what this is about and pass it on to him? Na-young called. He knows. He promised to call back. A long time ago. Tell him I'm worried. After what happened, Aisha said politely, but without emotion, and hung up. She stood for a few minutes, pondering. Who was this woman? A friend? A lover? Perhaps that very connection from his past life, the one that could restore his memory, or conversely, complicate everything. She had a choice. Forget to deliver this message. Erase the call record from the system. Get rid of a potential threat to her new position. After all, if someone from his past appeared in his life, the need for Aisha as a crutch might disappear. But she remembered the wallet on the floor. She remembered her deception. She picked up the intercom receiver in the office. Mr. Minjun, Lee, and Na-young just called you. She asked you to call back. Said she was worried. There was a pause on the line. Okay, he finally answered. Thank you. He said nothing more. He didn't explain who it was. He didn't call in her presence. Aisha didn't ask. She had fulfilled her duty as a manager and as someone who no longer wanted to lie. What he did with this information was his choice. From that day on, Minjun sometimes became thoughtful. He didn't mention the call, but Aisha noticed him occasionally leafing through old photo albums he'd found in the library, peering into faces that meant nothing to him. One day, when Aisha brought him evening tea in his office, he sat staring into space. Na-yeon, he said suddenly, not looking at Aisha. That name, it evokes a feeling, not an image, not a memory, but a sensation, warmth, and a slight bitterness. Strange. Aisha carefully placed the cup on the table. Perhaps you should meet her, she suggested, overcoming the strange tightness in her chest. If she's from your past, it might help. He looked at her, his gaze penetrating. Do you think so? I believe in filling the void with facts, not guesses, she answered honestly. Good or bad, he nodded. Perhaps, but not now. Now what matters is what we have. And what we have is order and predictability. In my personal life, I need those more than warm, yet vague, feelings. He didn't call Na-young. Aisha didn't know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing, but she understood that his choice was to remain in the present, where she was part of a settled life, rather than immerse himself in the chaos of the past, where her place was uncertain. A month passed. Aisha had fully embraced her role as manager. The house ran like clockwork. Maria proved to be an excellent assistant. Minjun was gradually regaining control of the business, although his memory had never returned. They existed within the strict boundaries of a professional relationship, but these boundaries had become comfortable, filled with mutual respect. One Friday, while tallying the week's expenses, Aisha handed him a report. He glanced at it, signed it, and then set it aside. Aisha, your contract as manager is for a 3-month probationary period, he reminded her. A month has passed. I have no complaints. Quite the contrary. She waited silently, nervous inside. That's why I want to offer you a change of arrangement, he continued. Right now, you're living in the maids' quarters. I want you to move into the guest house on the property. It's small, but separate, with its own kitchen, living room, and bedroom. You'll have your own space. This isn't just an upgrade. It's a sign that your position here is permanent and significant. You won't be a live-in manager, but a manager with your own residence. The rent will, of course, be included in your compensation package. So, for you, it's free. Aisha was stunned. The guest house was a small yet completely self-contained cottage nestled deep in the garden, beautiful and cozy. It was a leap across a vast chasm, from servant status to almost family in the professional sense. That's very generous, she breathed. It's practical, he corrected. Your efficiency and loyalty increase the value of my assets, both the house and my peace of mind. An investment in your comfort is an investment in stability. Besides, he hesitated slightly, I think you need a place where you can simply be Aisha, not Minjun's manager, where you can invite guests if you want. The last phrase betrayed not only the calculating employer, but also a man who understood her isolation. I agree, Aisha said, feeling a lump rise in her throat. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll finalize the details on Monday. You can inspect the house and start moving things in this weekend. Moving into the guest house took only one day. Aisha had very few personal belongings, but they were her belongings in her home. She walked through the rooms, touching the walls, turning lights on and off without meaning to. The silence here was different, not that of work, but of personal peace. She didn't throw out the blue dress. She brought it with her and placed it on the top shelf of the bedroom closet. Now it wasn't an anchor, but rather a historical artifact. The main house was visible from the cottage balcony. Aisha stood in the evening, a cup of tea in her hands, looking at the illuminated windows of the study. He was there. She was here. Their worlds had been separated by a garden wall and professional boundaries, but now they coexisted on new, clear, and solid foundations. A couple of days after moving in, Minjun called her on the intercom. Aisha, please bring the latest report on the fence repairs. And, if you're not busy, grab 2 coffees. In the office, she made coffee, grabbed a folder, and headed into the main house. He was sitting in the office, not at his desk, but in a chair near a low table. Sit down, he said. Let's get the reports out. They discussed the renovation, the gardener, the delivery schedule. The business part was quickly wrapped up. Then there was a short pause. He looked into his cup. How do you like the new house? He asked. Very nice. Quiet. Thanks again. You're welcome. That's fair. He paused. You know, I've been thinking about what you said, about facts instead of guesses. Aisha became wary. I've decided not to actively delve into the past, not to call old acquaintances, not to delve into old scandals. My memory is a blank slate, and I prefer to write a new story on it based on what I see now, on the facts. He looked at her. You are a fact. Your work, your honesty of late, your devotion to your home, these are facts. They weigh more heavily on me than the vague shadows of what I don't remember. You were the first to greet me in this new world, and perhaps it's for the best. Aisha knew he wasn't talking about love or deep friendship. He was talking about a foundation, and he'd chosen her as part of that foundation. I'm glad I can be of service, she said, and it was true. You're more than serviceable. You're reliable, he corrected, and in my position, that's the rarest and most valuable currency. He finished his coffee. That's probably all for now. Have a good evening, Aisha. Have a good evening, Mr. Minjun. She left him in the study. Walking back along the garden path to her warm, bright cottage, she felt neither excitement nor triumph. She felt a deep, calm satisfaction. Her adventure, which had begun as a mad attempt to steal someone else's life, had led her to create her own, complex, demanding, but real. And her place in that life was well earned. She turned and looked again at the large house. A light was on in one of the windows. 2 worlds, separated by a garden, but united by mutual respect and a strange, hard-won honesty. Her story didn't end here. She was just beginning a new chapter. No lies, no masks, simply Aisha, the manager, and in this simplicity lay her true strength.